On today's podcast, I'm going to be speaking with Millie Kieve, who runs a charity in the UK. Her organization is all about promoting awareness of medicines that can harm mental health. Her website can be found at www.april.org.uk, which stands for Adverse Psychiatric Reactions Information Link. Millie is a fierce researcher, has run conferences, lectures, and has YouTube videos you can watch. On her website, you can see more of what she does. She truly has a passion for bringing out the truth about medications. I've known Millie for a long time, and to be honest, it's been so long I don't even remember how I found her. I was lucky enough, though, to meet her in person when she and her family were here in Boston in 2013 visiting. She's an absolutely remarkable woman. This will probably be the first of many interviews that I have with Millie because she is such a wealth of information about not just benzos, but all the drugs that can cause psychiatric side effects that then lead people to being prescribed a benzodiazepine. I hope you enjoy my conversation with Millie as much as I enjoy speaking with her. Today I am so excited to have with me Millie Kieve from the United Kingdom, and she is a powerhouse of a woman. And before we get started, Millie, can you tell us a little bit brief history about why you started your organization and how you decided to name your organization?
Yes, hello, Geraldine and Garrett and all those people in the US and anywhere else who are listening. And I hope that by our talking together today, we can create awareness and perhaps even save a life somewhere. So the aim of April, and April is the charity I started after I lost my daughter, Karen. I'll tell you about that in a moment, but April stands for Adverse Psychiatric Reactions Information Link. And I started the charity when I found in a library at the British Library, it was the medical department, a lot of information on medicines my daughter had taken that the doctors seemed to be unaware of, such as nightmares can be the beginning of a side effect, that if it's noticed unless the drug is stopped, perhaps the person won't slip into a psychotic episode, which is what happened to my daughter. And basically, because I worked for other charities that were focusing on psychiatric drugs or prevention of suicide, that didn't want to actually mention the psychotropic drugs and the psychiatric drugs that people were put on. And I also wanted to mention the everyday drugs, antibiotics, antimalarials, acne drugs, all kinds of medicines that can trigger psychiatric side effects. So that's how the charity came to begin. Of course, it started in about 1998. Karen, my daughter, died in 1995. She had 10 years of ups and downs with different drugs that caused her problems. The sulfonamide drug, Dianet, which is a hormonal drug, also used as a contraceptive, though not licensed for that. And she was given an antidepressant that caused her to have akathisia, the terrible agitation. She was on a benzodiazepine, temazepam, that I persuaded her to stop because I didn't know it was addictive. And really, that's a brief history of why I started April.
Okay. So years ago, we asked on Facebook what led people to be put on a benzodiazepine. And one of the major reasons was a reaction to other medications, which is where your organization comes in. So today, I'd like to discuss just a few of the major medications, two of them actually, and then I want to mention a third one. So the first one is the birth control pill. And the second one I want to talk about will be the class of antibiotics known as the fluoroquinolones, the quinolones. And then because we're coming into flu season, I'd like you to address Tamiflu because one of our people who was fully recovered got the flu last year and she was given Tamiflu and she had a terrible reaction. And it's been almost a year now that she's been seeing doctors and they all said it's impossible that Tamiflu comes with any side effects. So let's start with the birth control pill because that's what has led so many women into our support groups because they started to have side effects from it, which are not really being recognized. Doctors aren't telling people.
Right. Well, the drug that I focused on out of all those hormonal drugs, which are used for the skin or hair problems or contraception, is called Dianet or Diane 35 in some countries, apparently not exactly licensed in the USA, although now it's called cociprindiol, which is another name, but there are many, many names. They're all the generics. It's a drug that is made up of ethinylestradiol, which is the contraception side of it, but the major part of it is an antiandrogen, which is called cyproterone acetate, also used for men who have prostate cancer. It reduces the testosterone and was known to cause depression. I haven't studied individual other birth control pills, but we know they all cause blood clots. And in fact, Dianet was so much higher risk than the others that the European Medicines Agency withdrew it for 3 months to invite people to let them know what's happened. And I put a YouTube video up which has had thousands of views on it about Dianet, asking people to report to the EU Medicines Agency. But very few people spoke about the depression. So when I had 100 emails from girls who said the cloud lifted when they stopped taking the drug and that they didn't realize their depression was caused by the drug and they'd been put on antidepressants, when I had all these emails, I persuaded Dr. June Rain, the head of the MHRA, which is the equivalent of the FDA in America, to look at these emails. She kept denying there was any point at first, but eventually, after nagging, which I'm good at, she did say send them in. And then she said, oh, we'll do a review of Dianet. And I immediately phoned Sarah Bosley, who's the health editor on the Guardian newspaper, and it went on the front page of the Guardian, at which time the MHRA put it on their website. Up until then, they hadn't. But they did put Dianet is known to cause depression, so I was pleased about that. That's the basis of my knowledge, anyway, about Dianet. My daughter took it, and it caused her.
We have so many girls. Oh, awful, awful. But and it's sad because we have so many girls that's how it all started, was from the birth control pill. And my own daughter, when she was 15 and all the kids were taking birth control for cramps or whatever, their skin was clearing up. So my daughter went and got it without my permission. At least she told me, and she got so deathly ill from it.
Oh,
I had to lay in bed with her for 3 days to help her with the side effects she was having. And I said to her, don't ever, I mean, she's now 31. She does not take any birth control. She's married and no birth control.
right.
So the next drug,
Yeah, just
I'd like to
just
talk
one
about
thing.
the
I just
fluoroquinolone.
Yeah, I just can
Yeah.
mention one more thing about I joined another charity before I started April because my first attempt to help people was through other charities. I didn't think of having my own. And this was a charity against young suicide. And there was a lady very much involved there on the committee whose daughter, she believed, took her life after coming off the birth control pill, the suddenly stopping it. I mean,
Right.
she was a pharmacist.
Yeah.
And her belief was that was what caused her daughter's suicide.
Yeah, we're going to actually have a mother on when I do the show on suicides, who her daughter, it all started from the birth control pill, and her daughter did commit suicide. I should see, we're going to get into, because I say commit suicide, and we're going to talk about that in a minute because I say it wrong. When we were speaking one time, I mentioned, the website that has people, they put up different pictures of people that commit suicide, and you corrected me and said that's not the way to say it. It's died by suicide, which it's not very popular here in the United States to say it that way. Can you explain that?
Well, it's because the
Why
people,
it's more appropriate?
yeah, years ago, suicide was a crime and the word commit was used, and it's not a crime. And therefore, people
Right.
involved in suicide charities do say died by suicide.
I am going to try very hard to change because I'm so used to saying that. And I think you're right. It's so important. So I'm so glad that when we had that conversation, that came up, because there are so many people now whose children have died by suicide, or parents have died by suicide, and these people are suffering. And so we have to bring a whole different
Mm.
name to that.
Can I just
So let's get into yeah, absolutely.
I just want to say one other thing. Not every
Yeah.
suicide is a deliberate
Mhm.
act to kill themselves. This was pointed out to me years ago when people who were paranoid might even lean over a bridge to see how it's been repaired or how it's been made, that they lose their sense of danger, as happened to my daughter, because the window she leaned against to stare out to see what this crane was doing, putting scaffolding on a roof, had a broken safety catch. But in her, as I call it, right mind, which might not please some people, if she'd have been thinking straight, she would not have stood on a chair by a window because she was afraid of heights. And
Right.
that was not considered a suicide, it was considered an accident. But to me, there's no difference, because when people die by suicide who are not thinking straight, and I will mention Lady Marr, who spoke in the House of Lords, how her sheep that were being dipped in this organophosphate fluid triggered her intent to kill herself for a full 10 minutes. She actually spoke to the Lords
Mm,
about this. So this sudden onset to suicide can be something that is so overwhelming, or it can be an
right.
accident. Yeah,
Right. I'm so glad you brought that up. That's true because I think a lot of them are accidental when we
yeah,
see them come up.
yeah.
That's very good. Now the other thing is because we have so many coming into the groups that are given the quinolones, the fluoroquinolones, and
Mm.
you do so much research. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Well, I haven't really studied the fluoroquinolone antibiotics, except an amazing young woman called Beth in America, who used to have a website, but she was hacked or something, has the most incredible knowledge of these drugs. And people who have side effects are called floxed. They call it, they've been
Right.
floxed. And my understanding is that the FDA warned years ago about the neurological side effects. And I was given an opportunity to run free wellbeing workshops in libraries here. And the librarian who kindly let me have the space in 2 or 3 of the Westminster libraries suddenly phoned me one day and said, Millie, I can't believe it. He said, I've had this terrible side effect from a fluoroquinolone antibiotic given to me for a urine infection. He said, I was cycling along, my legs swelled up. He said, I had to cut my trousers off. And he didn't go straight to the hospital. And it took him months before he was able to cycle again. And that was the first time I met someone who'd actually had this in person. And then I went to India and I went to the Hospital for Tropical Diseases to discuss the possible vaccinations. He offered me fluoroquinolone antibiotics. I said, why are you
Mm.
giving me these? They're dangerous. Oh, he said, we give them out in bucketfuls. So the
Oh,
doctors seem to be unaware of the risks. To give them out just in case you get an infection, absolutely ridiculous. So yes, I think the warning in England has been very slow in coming. The FDA have put out warnings. And I would say to anybody listening to this, go onto the FDA, go onto the MHRA, sign up for the warnings. Anyone can sign up. And you've got to become knowledgeable, because unfortunately the doctors are so busy. And once they get their degrees, they feel they know it all anyway. So, well, I can't say that really, but
right.
it's difficult for them. I won't excuse
It
them,
is.
but the education here isn't great, to be quite honest, on adverse drug reactions.
Right.
Mm.
Well, I don't think I even mentioned this to you. My own husband got floxed, and when he was in the hospital for the month for the leukemia, we're dealing with two kinds of cancer. And I was there one day. They tried to offer him Ativan, which I would, said no. But he had so many infections over a 6-month period. They put him on Cipro, and I said to him, "Don't take it." But he took it, and I thought, well, maybe he's one of the lucky ones. He's not having a reaction. And then one day, as I was telling him about one of Garrett's, we were at a political function, and one of the mothers was out in the car. She had lost the ability of her legs, and she was just getting them back. And I'm telling him about all this, and he said, "But my legs have been hurting." So I pulled up an article, and he was reading all this stuff, and he said, "I have all of those symptoms." So he stopped the Cipro right then and there. He
Mm.
had been on it for 6 months straight. That's how much they told him, just take it every day.
Yeah,
And he stopped it, and his legs started to get better. I think it took, he might still have a little bit of ache inside them. So we mentioned
yeah.
it at Dana Farber. They said they never heard of it,
Oh,
never heard of a problem.
oh my goodness.
So
I
they
believe it.
said,
Mm.
yeah,
Sorry, I believe it was
yep. And they
licensed.
said, we'll put it,
Sorry,
yep, go ahead.
I believe it was licensed for anthrax. So if you'd come into contact
Ah,
with anthrax, which could kill you, I believe that's why it was first licensed. And my son was given a prescription for a fluoroquinolone antibiotic. Of course, he phoned me up. I said, don't you take that, Mark. I said, let's look up and see what some minor infection. And we found another drug that was listed that was fine. He went back to the GP, general practitioner, and asked for this other drug, and he gave it to him. He didn't mind, but why had he
Yeah.
prescribed that in the
No.
first place? It's the pressure and the
Why in the first
marketing
place? Yeah.
departments that push these drugs for financial reasons, not for the safety of the patients,
Right.
unfortunately.
Yeah. I know. So the nurse practitioner said, "Well, we'll put it in your file to never give you Cipro again." She said, "So next time we're going to give you Levaquin." I said, "No, that's still a quinolone. No, he's never to have one again."
Oh,
So, I mean, it was just crazy that there was no recognition and for them. And so I mentioned, well, the FDA has a black box warning, and she kind of, said, well, oh, I heard a little something about that. But so I mean, he's very lucky that he was able to walk, that he didn't lose the ability as some people have.
oh.
But he also didn't get the psychological symptoms, and that's what winds people up on a benzo and into our groups. It's crazy. So, but now the other one, again, because it's flu season, and here comes Tamiflu given out left and right. In fact, Garrett's sitting here beside me. When he had the flu last year, doctor wouldn't even let him come down, and he just prescribed the Tamiflu. I said, "You're not taking it." He got the flu. I got the flu. We didn't take it. We got through it. But one of our benzo girls who was recovered took it, and she's been sick ever since. So I know there's a pharmacist, and I saw a video she did on her Facebook that she quit being a pharmacist because of Tamiflu. And so, what do you know about Tamiflu?
Well, obviously, the drugs I mostly heard about when I first started my website in '98, I put all the drugs my daughter had taken. So that didn't include Tamiflu.
Hmm.
So I became pretty knowledgeable on those drugs, the sulfonamides, the Dianet, the anesthetics after surgery, and the drugs used during and after surgery. But what happened was I read about Tamiflu, and I happened to go to the House of Commons, the government head office sort of thing in London, and they had a meeting there on Tamiflu, and I was with one of my trustees, Ramo, and we went into the meeting. And we sat there and we listened and we said, oh, could we speak about the suicides we've heard about in Japan on this drug? And they went, oh, no, we won't discuss that. We won't discuss that. And they just shut us up really quickly. And when I went out of the room, I noticed it was funded by a pharmaceutical company. It's really only what I've read about, because I haven't put it as a specific thing on the website. But I do know that the British government spent a lot of money buying it, and I noticed that our Prime Minister had had breakfast with the people they bought it from the day before. I thought it was a bit of a scam, and it was a waste of money, because if it was going to help anyone with flu, apparently it would only give them an extra day, perhaps remission, and it certainly had harmful side effects. And I haven't studied the amount of psychological side effects, I have to tell you personally, but I'm aware, and my
Yeah.
family won't take it.
Right. No, no. In fact, this poor girl has been to so many ERs, been offered so many antidepressants.
Oh,
She won't go back on a benzo, but that's all they're going to offer her, and they just won't recognize it. So she's just, doing her best, trying to survive it and hoping that her body will recover from it.
yeah. I don't know what you
Um,
do in America, but here in England, we have a website which is the Association of British Pharmaceutical Industries. And on there, they put the data that is produced when the drug is licensed. So if you go to the website, which is medicines.org.uk, and put in the name of the drug, you will find the patient information
mhm.
leaflet, which of course we've only had, has been mandatory since 1998, thanks to the European Medicines Agency. My daughter died in '95, so we never had patient information, and we had no internet at that time. And basically, if you go to medicines.org.uk and you look at the SMPC, the summary of product characteristics for Tamiflu, that's what you have to do before you take any drug. Just look at the details.
That's very good.
Obviously,
Yeah, good
if you're very
information.
sick, you may need to take a drug, but the minute you feel you're not coping, you're getting nightmares or something, mood swings or physical things. I mean, my daughter first had nightmares with sulfasalazine. The final thing she had was blistering of her skin on her back as if she'd been burnt with an iron bar,
Oh,
and her skin fell off. Oh,
right.
yes, you're allergic to the drug, they said, but not when you have the nightmares or the paranoia.
Mm,
That's how it is.
awful. Just awful. Yeah.
Mm,
Oh, it's awful. So now, as we're coming towards the end of this, we're all indebted to Professor Ashton for her work, and you and I were amongst some of the people who were privileged to be invited to her funeral. But since I'm here in the U.S. and with all that I have going on, I was not able to attend. Even though my son, who's sitting here, he's like, "Well, let's go. We'll just fly over for a couple days and come right back." And I would have loved to have been there to see you and everybody else that I knew was going to be there. But you were able to attend, and you sent me a beautiful picture of the church where her funeral was. Can you tell us a little bit about your relationship with Heather and how special her service was?
yeah, well, Heather to me was an angel. She was like, oh, I can't describe how I felt. I really loved that woman. She was so kind and so
Hmm.
sweet. And I'll just go to my last conference, 2008, where she already had some lung disorder and she was coughing. And I kept giving her hot water to drink. You can see her talk on my website, april.org.uk.
Hmm.
And she was thanking me so much as if I was doing her a huge favor. But actually, she was doing me a massive favor by being there. And we had a session on coming off medicines where she was there with Pam Armstrong, who sadly has also died quite young,
Yeah,
and
she
David
was great.
Healy was
Yeah.
there. They had a little discussion, people could talk to them. That was an offshoot of the conference. But what was so wonderful was that if anyone emailed me with a problem with a benzo, and I'd contact Heather and I'd say, look, this person's got this problem, she'd say, okay, just give me their email address or tell them to email me, I'll speak to them. She would deal with each one separately, one to one. No other
She
doctor
did.
did that.
Yeah.
That was
She used to
amazing.
send letters. People, yep, she used to send letters. And
Yeah.
when I asked her to write for the book that I was doing, when it came in the mail, the 3 chapters that we now consider the Ashton manual, I was floored with how much work she
Mm.
did.
Mm.
I mean, and look at that's translated into I don't even know how many
I'd just
languages at this
like,
point. It's
I,
just
yeah, I'd
amazing.
just like to tell you a couple of things she said to me. One thing which
Hmm.
might make people think, she said, Millie, there are benzoreceptors in the brain and they weren't put there for Valium. So I said to her, do you mean there are foods that could affect? She said, nobody does the research. That is needed because people who seem to have these remissions, where they don't call it remission, it's a relapse. You just wonder, is it something they're eating? Could it be? I mean, we don't really know the
Right.
details of how these drugs are made, but that was an interesting thing that she said. Um, what was the other thing I wanted to say?
Very interesting
When,
because we see a lot of people changing their diets and getting better.
yeah, interesting. Very, well, somebody should be, of
Mhm.
course, the industry won't do this research. It's got to be somebody who has a personal interest, is willing to put the money into it. If you can
Right.
find somebody like that. The other thing she told me, when she ran the Newcastle clinic, which was attached to the university, she would spend an hour with people. And she said she found a man who had breast cancer. Another man had diabetes. They were put on benzos because the doctor didn't know what to do, but they hadn't diagnosed them properly. And then there was a
Right.
program on the radio. Have I got time to just tell you about this? It was on benzodiazepines,
Sure.
and I decided
Yep.
to be on the action line for the BBC because I felt people need to talk to somebody. But there was only me and my trustee Lucille, who's even older than me, and I'm pretty old. I'll be 80 next year. So she and I
And
spent,
you're so full of energy.
oh, you should see me in the mornings. No, not really. But anyway, she and I spent 3 months calling people back. And one lady was up in an island in Scotland. She was so lonely. She said they won't recognize there's a mental health problem here. And I realized the loneliness of people. There almost needs to be like a telephone link that people can ring and talk to each other. And then another man phoned me and he was a transsexual and he said he can't tell his mother because she was 90. So I found him a club to go to. And he said to me, do you know, he said, talking to you for half an hour has helped me more than 10 years of seeing doctors. And these are the kind of people that get put on benzos because the doctor doesn't know
Right.
what to do.
Right. They're just given for any reason. It's very, very sad. I mean, I have 3 pages when we asked on Facebook what led them to be put on one. It was 3 pages, and anxiety was really not the major thing. I mean, yes, there were plenty put on for anxiety, but some of them were crazy, the reasons.
Mm. Mm.
Um, so I would advise anybody listening to this podcast to visit Millie's website at www.april.org.uk. Again, that's April, like the month, and make yourself familiar with the medications on that have caused issues. Watch some of her videos, spread the word about her website, because you could save somebody from unnecessary suffering. And Millie, is there anything else that you want to add today before
Yeah,
we hang up? Because I'm going to have you back on, because there's
well,
so many meds on your website that have to be discussed.
well, it's just that when people go to a doctor and say, I think this is a side effect, if they've got some scientific data in their hand to hand the doctor, it does help. Because one lady said to me, her doctor wouldn't change her cardiac medicine until I sent her copies from books. Even the American Psychiatric Association have a book called Adverse Psychiatric Side Effects of Prescription and Over-the-Counter Medication by Studemeyer and Brown. And there are pages in there that you can photocopy if you can get hold of it. And also from the drug data manual, that you have in America, we have the BNF. Copy the page where it says about the side effects, show it to the doctor, because what you'll find, that data sheet I told you about on medicines.org, and it's org for organization. The one doctor said to me, I said, all doctors should be tested on their knowledge of what is on that data sheet, interactions and everything. And he said, it's a legal document. It's a lot to read. This was a clinical pharmacologist said this. So the patients, have got to be knowledgeable. We've got to get the facts. We've got to photocopy them. We've got to show them the doctor, the primary care doctor or the GP, because they've probably had hardly any education on adverse drug reactions, except from the industry, where, of course, they won't tell them very much about these kind of things.
Right. Right. Well, many years ago, we had the conversation about, genetic DNA testing. And we thought then, within 5 years, you're going to see everybody having it done. Right now, unfortunately, people have to have it done privately. Do you see over in the UK anything happening more over there where it's being done? Because
no, are we going to talk about this today, or is this going to be another conversation another day? Because that's all.
So I think, yeah, we're probably going to do this another day. I just want to know over there, is there any more happening?
No,
yet?
I'd say
we'll do a whole thing on this.
I'd say look at my website, look at Munir Pir Mohammed. Professor Munir Pir Mohammed did a study on 2 hospitals. He found in Liverpool, 1 in 16 patients were admitted to A&E. That's the accident emergency due to adverse drug reactions, and that was excluding psychiatric and maternity and pediatric. And since he came to my conference, because again I nagged him, he's a wonderful, lovely person. He's the NHS chair of Pharmacogenetics. His talk is on my website, and it's not just the genetics, it's the tissue types, the gender, everything. I mean, there's a lot of things to take into account. Nothing's being done here. The industry uses the testing for their own development of drugs, but I wish we did have more testing, because I noticed the Mayo Clinic in America suggests that anyone going on an antidepressant should have a genetic test to see which one they can tolerate, because there was a little boy in America and he died, and they thought the parents had killed him, and he lacked CYP2D6, which is an enzyme, or it's a polymorphism, they call it, not quite right. And this lack of this enzyme means the drug can build up and become toxic in your body because it's not dispersing properly. So there are reasons why we get side effects, but unfortunately, doctors are not taught about this.
Right. So we're going to have to do a whole show on that, because that would save so much suffering if we could do that first. So Millie, thank you so much for today. I know with the time difference, you're certainly ahead of us.
It's
17:31. And I really appreciate you being on today.
It's 17:31 here.
Right.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. So I will be in touch with you. Thank you, Millie, for being on today.
Thank you, Geraldine, for calling me, and lovely knowing you. And well done with everything you do, because you're an amazing lady.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate it. All righty. Thank you.